Hello and welcome to today's session. We'll be learning a little more about Geoffery Chaucer today. In the earlier section, we learnt about the age, the salient characteristics of the age of Chaucer. I'm Dr. Zohra Iqbal from the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. So, about Geoffery Chaucer. The dates are 1340 to 1400 AD. He belonged to England, and England is his resting place also. He was buried in the Westminster Abbey, perhaps the first poet to be buried there. He got his place there in the lucky corner, the poet's corner as it is said. He was not just a poet or a writer. We know him by a number of other ways. He was an author, a philosopher, a bureaucrat, and at that moment he was a diplomat. He was the earliest of the great moderns, father of English poetry and also known as the grandfather of English fiction. He was born around 1343 AD, although exact year is not known, but still we allot this date to him. Born of wealthy parents, his father was a wine merchant, and during his life he held important posts and positions too. The fact that he was a great diplomat can be seen from the fact that he was captured by the French during one of the expeditions, that is the Brittany expedition of 1359. But he was ransomed by the then ruling king. Edward III later sent him on diplomatic missions to various countries like Geneva, France and Florence. There he got a chance to meet various other authors in various other languages, for example Dante, Boccaccio and Froissart. The fact that he was important during those times is known from the fact that in 1374 he was appointed Comptroller of the lucrative London Customs. And in 1386 he was elected member of the parliament. Then a number of other royal posts he held under Edward III and Richard II. It goes to the credit of Chaucer to have worked under three kings. There are a number of works which go to his credit. They are the Parliament of the Fowls, the House of Fame, the Book of the Duchess, Legend of the Good Women, Troilus and Cressida, and also the Canterbury Tales. We can cut his literary works into three portions: the earlier period, the middle period and the last period. The earlier period, which was up to 1370, in this period we have the translation of Roman de la Rose and the Book of the Duchess. Middle period, the House of the Fame, the Parliament of Fowls, translation of Consolidation of Philosophy, Troilus and Cressida, the Legend of the Good Woman, and in the last period we have the Canterbury Tales. Actually, we are going to do the prologue to the Wife of Bath's Tale, which is a portion in the Canterbury Tales. The Wife of Bath's Tale is in the Canterbury Tales. So we'll look into that, but for that we need to know the contribution of Chaucer as well as the background of the Canterbury Tales. Chaucer is the earliest of the great moderns. He is considered the first poet of the Middle Ages, and like Dante, he is the bridge between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The modern age had not begun to assert itself, and the medieval age was still there, it had not passed away. He is modern among medievals and medieval among the moderns. Chaucer was the pioneer in many things. Rather, many works go to his credit. And amongst these, he was also the father of the English novel. Troilus and Cressida, this one is the first novel written in verse, and it has a plot, dialogues, humor, irony, realism, conflict, dramatic element, etc. That means almost all the elements of a good novel. Then the character of Cressida is the first true psychological study into the mind of a complex woman. Pandarus, another of his character, is the first comic character in English. Chaucer had a great descriptive power. We should say that he paints pictures through his words. But his aim was to write poetry for its own sake. He did not want to philosophize or reform or to tell anybody about the morals. To Chaucer goes the credit of creating the English language and poetry. That means the language that we use today began with the writing of Chaucer. He picked up the East Midland dialect and refined it so that we can have the language that we are using today. He was the first metrical artist, humorist and humanist, first national poet of England. He reformed and reshaped the language. That is, as I said, the language that we use today began then. He was the first person to start writing in English and to give it its name also. Before him, the age of anonymity existed, meaning those writers who wrote in English could not give their identity to their works. He gave musical sweetness and liquidity to the language also. Chaucer was also the first realist. He was the first poet who revealed the truth about life as he saw it. Then he believed poetry had a free and secular spirit. He portrayed comprehensive picture of contemporary life. A glimpse of this can be seen in Canterbury Tales also. He presented realistically the social, economic and religious conditions of the age. This he could do because he was a keen observer of men and manners. Let's come to the beginning of Canterbury Tales and a general introduction about it. What exactly is it and how did it begin? That was the age of transition, as I said. Many people had many queries about how the clergy were behaving, or they could not believe certain things, they had doubts about certain things. That was an age of confusion too. In those days, pilgrimages were quite famous. People resorted to the ways of the religion in some way or the other, and they took on to pilgrimages. One such pilgrimage was taken to this cathedral, the Canterbury Cathedral. The pilgrims were going to visit the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. Canterbury Tales is one of the most remarkable works of Chaucer. These tales were influenced by Boccaccio and his writing Decameron. I just now told you that Chaucer came in contact with these writers while he was on diplomatic missions to other countries. And one such writer was Boccaccio. From his work Decameron, he took the inspiration to write the Canterbury Tales. So here we have 29 pilgrims who meet at a place called Tabard Inn, and they decide to go ahead with their pilgrimage, that is to St. Thomas's shrine. 23 of them will be telling stories. Why would they tell stories? Because in those days the journeys were long and people required something to talk about so that the time could pass easily. In Canterbury Tales, there are 24 stories in total. Chaucer himself is one of the pilgrims. In Canterbury Tales, there are 24 stories. Chaucer himself tells two stories here. One is the tale of Topaz, another one is the tale of Meliboeus. The Canterbury Tales begin with the knight's tale and they end with the parson's tale. So in totality we have a number of tales. This is called the frame story also, meaning within a huge frame of the Canterbury Tales we have a number of other tales inside it. So the setting chosen for the Canterbury Tales, or as we can say that the time that the pilgrims chose to go on this pilgrimage was April, and the location was Tabard Inn. In the prologue we have this mention that there were 29 pilgrims and the narrator too. Chaucer was also one of them. The host proposes that each pilgrim tells two tales on the way up and two tales while they come back. The best tale will win the dinner at the Tabard Inn and also stay, which will be free. This was an offer by the host himself. In this entire work from Chaucer, we have the representation of the medieval society. The clergies, the military, the nobility and also the lay people. The clergies, those were the people ordained for religious works, and the characters here mentioned are prioress, the monk, friar and parson. In this nobility sector we have the knights and the squires also. Lay people also were along with them while this pilgrimage was on. All the other characters we can place in the lay category. Chaucer's art of characterization was distinct in itself. It was an art unlike any other person who had written anything before him. He created human encyclopedias by describing the physical and social mannerisms, beliefs and morals of each and every character. He has dealt with all these characters in great detail. We have spoken about his art of characterization earlier also. His portrayal was real, and we have the real life portrayal of these characters. They were drawn because he had keen interest in men and manners. We have the peasants or the working class or the agricultural laborers as they were, the clergy who were instructing and praying, the feudal lords who owned, protected and managed the land, and the last, the merchants also here. He was the first writer to bring the atmosphere of romantic interest about men and women to his works, and the first great narrative poet in English. This art can be seen in the entire Canterbury Tales. He is narrating through various characters, various tales, as many as 24. This is the end of this session. Next time when we meet, we will be looking into the Wife of Bath's prologue to her tales, and Wife of Bath is one of the characters in the Canterbury Tales. Thank you and have a nice day.